Hi everyone, and welcome to the Noona's Noonchi Deep Dive, being introspective with K-dramas from a mental health perspective. Let's discuss toxic masculinity through the K-drama The Red Sleeve, which was one of my favorites. First of all, let's talk about how this topic comes up. Episode 13 made me think about the traditional masculine norms, particularly in Asian culture, and I'll break that down shortly. But I really love, that side character, the royal bodyguard. Wasn't he funny? And he was by Isan's side from the very beginning. Isan, the crown prince, played by Junho, or now the king, crown prince turned king. And he was always there, and he would, royal bodyguards also provide that advice and feedback, and they're like their bestie, right? Well, episode 13, Junho, funnily, I'm laughing, and I know I'm talking about toxic masculinity, but I like this scene. Episode 13, Junho approaches him and says, I have a question. Can't figure women out, is what he's getting at, because I think he's perplexed about Tugim at this point, refusing to be his concubine. This is episode 13, so very on the later half of the K-drama. And the royal bodyguard's like, you can ask me. I know a lot about women being married and all, right? It's really funny. And even what he says, it's funny, because it just cracks me up that he's thinking this is like this novel idea. I don't know about you, but basically he tells Junho in a nutshell, pretend, and I think this was literally the translation, which I'll share that I don't agree with, but pretend to be weak and pitiful or pathetic. Yakkan, 불쌍해. 불쌍해 is like pathetic, pitiful. Show yourself to be that way and you'll win the woman over. Now, let's go to toxic masculinity, which is a concept, right, about adhering to traditional masculine norms of showing dominance, power, being all things anti-feminine or anti-femininity, right? And that's what I mean by the traditional masculine norms. In the K-dramas so far, I would say to date, in the last several years, we are really seeing a shift. And one of the things I love about K-dramas, and I've heard this from women, seeing it with their husbands, seeing the men express so expressively their emotions, crying. I mean, think about it. I can't think of any K-drama lately where you don't see the men cry. Funny enough, I don't believe that's as common in real life because we're talking masculine norms, especially in Asian culture, right? All things Asian culture is about showing face and saving face, being perfect, especially if you're a boy. Perhaps you're watching this and you're a man now. Did you remember then when your dad or mom or parents said to you or grandparents said to you, boys don't cry, right? And this is not just existing in Asian culture, by the way. But boys being told like boys will be boys, men will be men, be strong, don't show emotions, don't express yourself. You're not supposed to. You're also not supposed to show that you're physically weak. Don't get physicals. You're not supposed to go to the doctor. What's wrong with her? You went to the doctor, right? That still exists today. That's why that term toxic came about, because it's unhealthy behavior that we see that come out of these traditional masculine norms. Like I said, showing dominance and this power that you're all that. You can do everything with a bow and arrow, which is what this guy says in episode 13. That you can do everything with a sword, show how strong you are. It's also about being aggressive, showing that. And I would say, again, lately the K-dramas to date really pivot from that stereotype, which is good to see, which is why we really love it. And hey, a K-drama is all about the men crying, right? And you cry with them because it's still not traditional to see that. Now, going back to episode 13 in The Red Sleeve, when Junho's like, can't figure Tugim out, can't figure this woman out, what can I do to win her over? He asks the royal bodyguard. The royal bodyguard says, just pretend you're weak. 약한 척, 불쌍해 척. Just show that you're so pitiful and pathetic, and she'll just fall into your arms, because that's what happened to the woman he was trying to win over, his wife. Now, he is a royal bodyguard, so he's got some of that stamina and physical prestige and knows what he's doing, can kill people off for the crown prince or the king, right? So he's in that dominant position, of course. And in the beginning, you see him say, I was trying to show off my powers, how great I was with the bow and arrow, how I could take out a sword and kill someone in an instant. And then he said to Junho, but then the woman said to me, you scare me. That's, again, the toxicity, folks. It is scary, triggering, when you see toxic masculinity play out. And a lot of people are talking about that, right? That's a buzzword, it's trending. But I really want folks to turn to K-dramas to see how it's pivoting the portrayal of men, especially Asian men, Korean men in the K-dramas specifically, pivoting from that stereotype. or that traditional masculine norm that you have to be all about stoicism and not showing that anything bothers you, which even in that era, we're talking historical drama, and it is all about that. But Junho, obviously, so you're seeing that mix of current trends with the traditional historical drama and him showing so much expressive emotion, which is why we loved the red sleeve too. You're really loving that emotion. People may not know that, but you are. Here's the opposite of toxic masculinity and the message that you can take away today. Vulnerability. Traditionally speaking, people think of vulnerability still misconstrued, misunderstood, that it's about weakness, like kind of what the royal bodyguard was telling Junho. Oh, 약한 척, oh, 불쌍한 척. That is not what I mean by vulnerability. Brene Brown, famous author, corporate, all about corporate change here in the US, has great books. Daring Greatly is a great book, by the way, highly recommend, where she addresses vulnerability. She studies vulnerability and says this, and I said this before, vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage. Courage, courage. I'm going to say that again. Start putting that into your head. Courage equates to vulnerability. Being authentic and real about what's going on, because that's humane, to express emotions when you need to at the right time. Again, not wearing your emotions on your sleeve and boo-hooing and crying like a baby. I'm not saying that. Remember, there's dualities of life where you don't go to one extreme. Nothing's linear. But it could be more like, you're feeling something and want to show that to the woman you love. I'm talking about toxic masculinity, and being able to express that in a healthy way, which is you want to show that, yes, I'm good at this. I'm great with a bow and arrow. I am the royal bodyguard. In real life, I'm smart. I'm really good at my job. I'm a great speaker. I am a great engineer. I'm a great writer, an artist, whatever that is, great singer. Yes, show that. Show off your talent. But at the same time, what are you expressing? What do you want to show that vulnerability of courage, being like, hey, in reality, this is what's difficult about my life. Here's a little bit about my child, who I am. I love the podcast interviews where I get real with guests talking about how they relate to K-dramas, and they get vulnerable. Again, showing their true selves and what they learn and how it's built them up, built their resilience. The mindfulness practice that they developed to build that resilience. That's strength, courage, toxic masculinity. Let's kind of cross that out and show courage. And by the way, this, of course, I'm talking more about men because this is the episode that it's man to man, right? But in general, those traditional norms that showcase masculinity, which is also seen in all of us, showing that we're all that. So this is what we're going to do. The other thing I want to say, that research indicates that men are 2 times, maybe even 3 times more likely to die by suicide because their struggle is real with showing their emotion. And also they don't get help. They're like, well, I don't need help. I'm a man. That is unhealthy. That's the toxicity. We all need help when we need help, right? The other thing that research shows is that men don't suffer from depression as often as women. But guess what? In my line of work, I'm actually seeing that not to be true. They just don't report depression. Women are really good about expressing, I'm not doing great, I'm depressed. It's harder to find that in a male. And even now, I really, really, really bring that up with the Asian American professionals that I work with. I'm like, why you gotta show that you're all that? And actually, the more they show that, the avoidant coping, avoiding what they're feeling, what they're expressing, avoiding all that, guess what? Leads to toxicity, unhealthy behavior. Anything you avoid leads to toxicity, unhealthy behavior, in poor coping. Whether that's drinking, lashing out, angry, being angry all the time. Another symptom I want to say of depression is anger. And I do see that a lot, particularly in men, where they think, I'm just angry, I'm just pissed off. I'm like, well, you're depressed. And then they're like, no, right? But that's the misconception, that you're walking around in sorrow, being 불쌍해, pitiful when you're depressed, when that's not the case. Most of the time you're grouchy, irritated, frustrated. You go from 0 to 100 just like that. Anger. So again, that all relates to that unhealthy behavior of suppressing when you're not supposed to do that. Innately, human beings are supposed to express. and feel. And that takes work. So for those of you who feel like you relate to toxic masculinity, whether you're around it, experiencing it, or behaving like it, and struggle with finding help, there's nothing wrong with getting help. And by the way, getting help is also courageous. Asking for help is courageous. It builds your communication skills too. For all of us, to ask for help, it's hard. None of this is easy. But I'm saying, learn from episode 13. The bottom line is he's saying, hey, show yourself to be weak and pitiful. And let's not take the literal translation, being, let's be real. When you hurt your hand, you hurt your hand, and admit that. That's what the guy's saying. And then you get that connection to the other, from the other person, going, wow, this person's being real. Let me help them. And when you ask for help, you're more prone to get help because they see that trueness of you, the genuinity, right? But being authentic, being your true self at work means being vulnerable, showing that courage because it's your most accurate measure, right? Vulnerability is your most accurate measure of courage, and being able to express that. Vulnerability is a huge term in the corporate workplace here in the US. So spread it all around, because they're saying the most effective leaders, impactful leaders, show vulnerability in the workplace. So that said, episode 13, learn from the Royal Bodyguard today of how not to show traditional masculine norms and be vulnerable, showing courage and being yourself. Thanks for watching Noona's Noonchi Deep Dive. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button to get notified of new videos to come.